Why hello you lovely little peppercorns, my name's Noa Lee, god of game criticism and lord of excellent taste, and welcome to the Summer Catch-Up, a series of more laid-back videos about games from earlier this year that I didn't have time to, or in this case, cared enough about to make a full video out of. And for this week, you might want to crack a cold one to quench that thirst of yours, because I'm about to get real salty. Princess Peach Showtime is one of the most highly anticipated, competently made, fully realized, polished, streamlined, and inoffensive games that I've ever played. And for those very reasons, I hate everything about it. Not because it's bad, not in the traditional sense anyway. Like I said, it's competently made, doesn't suffer from too egregious of technical issues, despite a constant frame stutter that permeates from start to finish, which is pretty unusual for a Nintendo game, even a second-party one such as this, and it's structured in such a way that it gets you right into the action and back out the door in a reasonable amount of time. Not too long, not too short, just right, Goldilocks style. As far as Switch games go, the graphics are fine. The theming of an opera house with multiple stage performances that act as the various levels and theme the costumes that Peach dons throughout her her second solo journey is a neat idea, if a bit unoriginal, and overall is the very kind of game that most consumers will be fairly satisfied with after completing their one and only playthrough. That is, if they don't move on to something more exciting and artistically valuable first, like watching dust collect on their Wii U, for example. And I suppose from a technical standpoint, all those things are admirable, but through the lens of artistic meaning and heartful design, which is what I care about in case you're new around these parts, there's really no point to any of it, save for the making of a quick buck on the part of Nintendo and giving the Princess Peach simps of the world the absolute bare minimum viable product to sate their ravaging hunger. And product is the key word here. Make no mistake, this isn't a game that was crafted with love and dedication out of a desire to share a piece of the developer's collective artistic soul with the world, nor an exercise in exploration or deconstruction of one of gaming's most iconic characters. This is a cold and calculated business stratagem meant only to fill a gap in Nintendo's 2024 release schedule as they flounder about in a desperate attempt to keep their fans engaged enough that they won't see too much of a sales slump prior to the release of the Switch's successor. Princess Peach Showtime was developed by longtime Nintendo collaborator Good Feel, best known for Wario Land Shake It, Kirby's Epic Yarn, and Yoshi's Woolly/Crafted World. And your reaction to the games I just mentioned is indicative of how you'll react to everything else I'm about to say, because these are the very kinds of games that have a handful of dedicated players who very much overrate their level of quality based only on their interesting art direction, while the rest of the gaming world has responded to them with a resounding meh. If you can't tell by my tone, I'm in the second camp, because while in theory the previously mentioned games should be right up my alley, as on the surface they appear to be quirky experimental gems, and I'm all about that, really all their appearance and milieu have going for them is their shallow theming, as gameplay-wise they're among the most mediocre titles I've ever played. Mediocrity seems to be Good Feel's only goal as a developer, as practically all of their titles outside of the ones I just mentioned are insipid educational titles and pointless language learning flashcard software, which may explain this soft-spoken, school-marmish tone all of their games exude, as if their work is crafted not by a group of artists who care about video games as a medium, but rather a parent-teacher association that see them only as a vehicle to indoctrinate the youth into standard modes of education or deliver a calming, colorful cartoon meant only as white noise to be played during nap time. And Princess Peach Showtime is not only no exception, it might just be their crowning achievement of bland and pointless software, as unlike its predecessors, it doesn't even have a unique visual gimmick like Wario Land Shake It's hand-drawn graphics or the crafty worlds of Kirby's Epic Yarn, Yoshi's Woolly World, and its sequel, the only aspects of those games that actually made them worth a damn. Because as much as I dislike those titles as games, I'll be the first to admit just how exceptional they are in the visual department, and will fully credit Good Feel for at least innovating in that respect. Shake It, Epic Yarn, and Woolly/Crafted World are all gorgeous games with a lot of visual charm and personality. Their only real fault is that their gameplay can't measure up to the level of quality provided by their visuals, putting them on the same level of value as most children's TV shows, colorful and creative, yet devoid of any depth, vapid and mind-numbing when approached as more. Yet here in Princess Peach Showtime, there isn't even any of that visual magic, only cheap, waxy graphics and visuals which seem more in line with the medium of cake toppers than video games. Though perhaps this lack of care in the visual department can initially be seen in the original box art for the game that sort of went viral in the weeks leading up to Showtime's release. On the original cover, Princess Peach stares into your soul with these dull, lifeless eyes and a blank blank facial expression akin to your average blow-up doll, but prior to release, each of her forms on the cover got a literal facelift to give her much more personality and attitude. Yet this attitude change isn't reflected in-game, as most of the time Peach still stares off into nothingness, looking as though there's nary a thought in her head, which to me is only further indicative of the lack of care towards this game's visual personality as a game, since they only bothered making this change for the marketing graphics and box art, a product through and through. Now, before anyone complains that it was probably just too late in development for them to make this same change to the in-game assets, know that that's exactly my point. The bland visuals and lifeless mannerisms of Peach found in the majority of the game were so foundational to its developmental trajectory that they weren't even questioned until it was too late in development for them to do anything about it. Where's that spark of visual creativity that Goodfield's previous games are known for? At the very least, I was expecting another mediocre platformer with fantastic visuals, but we didn't even get that. To be fair, I suppose there is a bit more of a creative spark here than I've so far given the developers credit for, as at the very least, Goodfield went to the trouble of designing most every asset in the game to look like a prop or a backdrop that belongs in a play, but it's not particularly well done, or as I said, original. Most of these designs are just basic, like the developers crafted standard 2D assets and merely pasted them onto a corrugated cardboard model, or added strings to them to sort of give the sense that they're part of some mechanical rig, adding visual stage lights here and there to round out this theatrical feel. But I mean, Dynamite Headdy did this same thing 30 years ago on much more primitive hardware, yet look at how much more effective this is in comparison. Puppeteer is the obvious king of this stage look aesthetic, and even that game's coming up on its 11th birthday, so what gives? Even half-assing it, you should have at least ended up in the ballpark of those two games using modern hardware and tools. Or how about Little Big Planet, Tearaway, or even your own Yoshi's Crafted World, which you made just 5 years ago? You had plenty of material to draw upon as inspiration for this crafty stage look, yet you did the absolute bare minimum to bring it to life. And all this would be forgivable if the gameplay were the least bit interesting, but aside from a few neat ideas and a handful of decent set pieces, Showtime doesn't even have that going for it. I do think the idea of a small, slower-paced side adventure as opposed to the grand world-hopping romps the 3D Mario games take you through is a step in the right direction for a Peach-centric game, as I never got the sense while playing that it was unrealistic for her to take the proactive role and be kicking this much ass in this context, and I very much appreciate the desire to give gaming's poster child damsel in distress more agency and autonomy, even if the consequences for failure are merely that a well-renowned theater gets taken over by some weirdo. I do, however, take a bit of an issue with the fact that she has to play dress-up to do this and take on the role of an actor on a stage rather than her going on a quote-unquote real adventure, or designing a game around her role as, you know, the head of state within the Mario universe, but I suppose anything more would just be asking too much from a developer that clearly doesn't give a shit. I mean, at least it's better than basing an entire game around Peach having a series of mood swings. Can you imagine if they went that route with her character and central gameplay mechanic? Still, this whole setup and its execution is such a letdown. Peach is such an iconic character, so to end up with a game that clearly had less thought and care put into it than something like Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker, which stars a character literally no one is invested in, is a real shame. Much like with Nintendo's other leading lady, Princess Zelda, fans have long been dreaming of a starring role for Peach, even back when she was known only as Princess Toadstool here in the West, and while she's pretty much always been playable in the games from the Mario canon that require a larger cast of characters, primarily spin-off games like Mario Kart, Party, or the various Mario sports franchises, and she has been given more prominent and proactive roles in recent mainline Mario games such as Super Mario Odyssey and Wonder, the pitiful lack of her own starring roles that boil down to a paltry 2 games released almost 2 decades apart is more than a little disappointing. And while some have claimed this lack of a female presence in Nintendo Land to be the result of sexism, honestly, it's probably just that Nintendo never had any idea of what a Princess Peach game would even look like, since she was originally designed to be merely a character alongside Mario and his brother Green Mario. The fact that mainline Nintendo games are a bit of a sausage fest, Samus notwithstanding, is more a result of using the same characters from 40 years ago and the lack of new franchises from the company, which would give rise to opportunities to craft a female lead whose character and abilities would fit with the world she's a part of, rather than trying to design a game around a previously established character, especially one with as little depth heretofore as Peach. Like, I don't know, she's a woman. Emotions, I guess. Ballet or some shit. At least Princess Zelda is finally getting her own game that isn't on the CDI, and one that so far looks damn fine at that. So I bought this Princess Peach costume because originally I was planning on doing a full critique of Showtime, and I like to cosplay in those videos, but upon finishing it, I was so underwhelmed that I didn't really have anything to say about it, and I planned on just skipping it entirely. Yet the sheer mediocrity that is Princess Peach Showtime has sort of been stuck in the back of my mind ever since, and I knew that I just needed to vent my disdain as part of this more laid-back video series. So if you're wondering why I've barely talked about the game itself so far and it focused more on its place within the larger medium and culture, that would be why. But really, it's more than that. I don't need to talk too much about this game for you to know what it's all about, because you can see what it's all about through the gameplay that I'm showing, as it's so shallow that that's all you need. There's nothing interesting about this game, either good or bad, and even less for me to unpack and play off of as a critic. It just shows up, does the bare minimum, and moves on, never once touching the player on a deeper level of artistic purpose, a product for consumers and nothing more. The story goes that Princess Peach and her entourage of toads are visiting some theater that I can't be bothered to remember the name of to see a show or two when the evil phantomess of the opera Madame Grape and her army of grapists start running amok and take over the theater. During this insurrection, most everyone is cast out and a spell is placed over the building to prevent anyone from entering, leaving Princess Peach and her new friend Stella to travel into each act of the various plays and rescue their star performer by using the power of Sparkle. This Sparkle power allows you to don the thematically appropriate costumes of whichever play you happen to be participating in at the time and gaining the power of that play's star performers, here called Sparklas. And to the game's credit, this is a neat idea, even if it has been seen and done better before, and in theory, it should deliver a game with a lot of variety and opportunities for experimentation. After all, there are 10 plays in which to participate, each with their own accompanying costumes, and 3 acts per play, equating to 30 main levels plus extras and bosses. Plenty of room to expand upon its central mechanics and ideas. Except that that's more than a little misleading, because many of the costumes are functionally identical, even if their theming is wildly different. For example, Kung Fu Peach and Mighty Peach are both based around hand-to-hand combat, Ninja Peach and Darkwing Duck Peach are all about infiltration, platforming, and a bit of stealth, Mermaid Peach, Figure Skater Peach, and Patissier Peach all revolve around meandering about the level until you hit a point of interaction that involves timing your button inputs with minimal tweaks by the thumbstick. Sword Fighter Peach and Cowgirl Peach are little more than bog-standard action platformers, and Detective Peach is just awful. And believe it or not, these are the highlights of the game, as the first act of each performance actually begins with a long, drawn-out section where you play as just regular Peach, as her and Stella go through the same tired reaction of being surprised at the Sour Bunch showing up and wrecking up the place, as if there were any question of what the conflict of each level was going to be. During these moments, Peach uses the power of Sparkle to help the performers of the levels as best she can, which usually just boils down to her bringing flowers or trees or other objects back to life and boosting the confidence of the people around her by throwing a handful of confetti in their faces. Sparkle, bitch. Thankfully, after a while, the game will remember that it's played the same song and dance a dozen times already and decides that you're sufficiently bored enough to don the level's thematically appropriate costume in hopes that the contrast will be enough that you won't realize that it's still not doing anything interesting. Though, credit where credit's due, I did kinda like the ninja levels, as the stage theming was fairly well done here, at least much better than the rest of the game, and the stealth mechanics and light puzzles seem to fit really well with both Peach's character and the attitude the new box art mistakenly causes you to believe is present in the whole game, while all of Showtime's best set pieces are found in these levels as well. I don't know if the team at Goodfeel suddenly decided to give a shit for a day or what, but they should have just made the whole game out of this and expanded upon it, because this is where almost all of the passion and heartful design seemingly went. The rest of the game feels as though it was little more than a paying gig for them. That, however, is still probably giving the ninja levels too much credit, as they're really only good in the context of the mediocre mire that is the rest of the game. Still, some level of love and care shines through in these moments, and I guess it just goes to show that even a developer as artistically bankrupt as this can still make something artful if the mood strikes them. And I think that's what bugs me most about Showtime, apart from it clearly functioning as a mere low-budget cash grab by Nintendo, that is. It's this feeling that permeates the whole thing, and indeed all of the titles by Goodfeel that I've personally played, that a quality game is crafted when you stick to tried and true mechanics, theming, and scenarios. After all, if all these things have worked in other projects, then picking and choosing and copying them whole cloth will surely equate to another quality experience, right? Good Feel as a developer strikes me the same way that a lot of non-artists tend to view the artistic process, that it's all about technical competency that matters. This idea that if only I had basic drawing skills, I could make a great picture. If only my vocabulary were a little larger, I could write a great story. If only I knew all the scales on a guitar, I'd be able to write a great song, as if technical ability seduces the creative muse to come forth. But any real artist knows that that's simply not the case. If anything, it's the opposite. Technical competency is brought forth and gifted to those who first serve the muse, while those who try the former approach only find themselves highly skilled at the end of the road, but with no passion to drive that ability toward anything meaningful. Their competency turns to dust the moment they even consider making a work of art. Technically speaking, Good Feel knows their shit. They know their way around a game engine and 3D modeling software, have a strong grasp of game physics, color theory, and visual design. They're a team of skilled craftsmen through and through, but seemingly none of them have the artistic drive to make any of it matter. This is a developer that doesn't take meaningful risks, doesn't color outside the lines, in fact doesn't even consider using crayons from the larger sets at all, choosing instead to limit themselves to the standard box of 8 colors because that's what's worked in the past. That's what's guaranteed to make the most widely appealing product at the end of the day. Why use gold when we can continue using yellow? And that's what Good Feel as a developer is all about, using the same crayons and coloring books that they've always used and convincing themselves that they've made something worthwhile simply because the picture they chose happens to be different from the one they colored last time, crafting games that merely look the part of great works of art but have no inner spirit, no heart beating in their chests. Structurally, this may not be the case, but artistically, all of Good Feel's work with Nintendo is functionally the same bland, inconsequential, and artistically vapid game they've always made. It's just that this time the picture they've crafted isn't even all that interesting on a purely visual level, and that's a shame because Princess Peach deserves so much more than this soulless dreck. I'm Noa Lee, god of game criticism, and thus have I spoken. I got confetti everywhere, oh my god. What a nightmare. Why did I do this? This was a terrible idea.